for me really started with understanding myself, and I think understanding my story and what I wanted. And that takes a lot of time. You need to do a lot of soul searching to understand, what do you want in a program? What do you even want with an MBA? What do you want to get out of it?
Hi, I'm John Byrne with Poets and Quants. I'm at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. We have 3 panels. The first panel you can see on stage, students and graduates of great MBA programs. Our second panel will feature admission directors from 3 of the best schools in the world: Michigan Ross, Yale School of Management, and the Haas School of Business at Berkeley. And then our final panel, which we'll wrap up with, will be 3 employers of MBAs, 3 of the most desirable employers in the world, in fact, Google, Amazon, and McKinsey, with a bonus thrown in. We have the dynamic dean from Michigan Ross, Scott DeRue. So let's start with our panel of students and graduates. Let me introduce them to you. Actually, we have 3 people who have just or will just have completed the MBA. To my immediate left, we have Ariana Almas, who just graduated 4 days ago. In fact, her partner in crime, Ramu, graduated 4 days ago as well from Michigan Ross. Welcome. And then next to Ariana, we have Nate Maicon, who just took a final yesterday at Yale School of Management and will be graduating in roughly 3 weeks. Welcome.
Thank you.
And then we have Tam Emerson from Berkeley, Haas. She just completed her first year of the MBA program. So welcome, everybody.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, 3 of you have already been through that grueling 2-year experience. You just completed the worst of it, the core probably, right? So tell me, how did you decide that you wanted the full-time MBA to begin with? Ariana.
Sure. So I worked in the nonprofit sector for 5 years before coming to Michigan Ross, and I remember there was a very distinct moment where I had just gotten a new role. I was in it for about a few months, and I just started to realize that I was gaining more than I was able to contribute. So the amount of value I was able to bring to the organization was starting to plateau. And I thought, what could I do to build up my skill set, build my knowledge a little bit so that I'm able to continuously bring value back to the organization that I truly cared about. So that was a big decision for me. And I remember at the time, it was very serendipitous. I was talking to a friend who had just moved to Boston. I was in the Bay Area at the time, and she had started grad school. And as I was talking to her, she was just talking about all these experiences that she was gaining from and everything that she was learning, and it just clicked for me. I was like, I think I'm ready to go to school. And business school for me was the natural choice because I was working in the nonprofit sector. I was working at an organization called Year Up that supports young adults from historically marginalized backgrounds, preparing them for the corporate space. And so in the way I saw it, I was working on diversity and inclusion efforts through the nonprofit side, and I wanted to transfer that knowledge and experience over to the for-profit side. And I thought, what better way to do that than to go through the MBA.
Tam, you also are a non-traditional student. You came from a nonprofit as well.
Mm-hmm.
What was your thinking about what the MBA was all about before you actually got to Berkeley?
Sure, I was very similar to Ariana in the fact that I didn't ever actually even imagine going to grad school. I'm a first-generation college student and didn't, it was a hurdle even to get to that point. So I think the idea of going to graduate school was something I only understood once I started working in higher education at Brandeis University and seeing the students working and interacting with first-year Master in Public Policy students that were incredible kind of flipped the switch that there was some potential there. And very similar to Ariana, I felt like I was a team of one running an incredible leadership development program that was national. And I brought a lot of excitement to it, but most of the time I was making it up as I went along. And that's great. I mean, I had the ethic and the drive for it, but there was a point that I felt like, where is this fair to the organization that I am stewarding? For me to not think about what else could come for them with innovation and a new leader, but also for me, because I'm a part of the program myself, to go out and build a skill set and actually showcase to a lot of people that look like me and that I am close to and care about and mentor that this is a potential area that we can go into and that you can succeed. Even when thinking about business school felt felt very overwhelming, not understanding the process all that well, and not really feeling like I had too many people other than some very amazing mentors of mine to help guide me through the process. So it took a little bit of time, but I'm really, really excited that I did it.
Well, coming from the nonprofit world, I imagine you may have had a less than stellar idea of what business school was about.
Oh, definitely.
And what was it? Tell me what it was.
I mean, I think I had a very general understanding that I was going to go in and learn things like marketing and accounting, but I didn't have much of an understanding of the rigor of it. I don't think I had an understanding of the kind of wholehearted and well-rounded nature that a leader could look at, because I was seeing management done nonprofit world for my entire life, which I know the most impressive leaders, but having a full understanding of what a business should look like, I didn't quite understand that business school would make me dive in as deep as it did to places that I didn't even think I would go into myself. I don't think I'm going to become a core marketer after or jump into investment banking, though for those of you that are, good luck. Except I knew that having a better business acumen would make me stronger, and it took me time to figure out what that would look like.
Right. And Nate and Ramu both were in consulting before.
Yeah.
And in fact, you're going back into consulting fairly soon.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Ramu, let me ask you, how did you determine fit? You know, there's this sort of intangible but important aspect of choosing a program that has to do with chemistry,
Yeah.
just your inner gut and how do you feel about a school. How did you make that work for yourself?
So I think fit for me really started with understanding myself, and I think understanding my story and what I wanted. And that takes a lot of time. You need to do a lot of soul searching to understand what do you want in a program, what do you even want with an MBA, what do you want to get out of it? Why is this even making sense in your part of your life? Can you do this without it? So I went through and built, of course, I'm an engineer, I'm a consultant, I built lots of spreadsheets, I have lots of models. But I have, in my spreadsheet, very organized, I have a personal story, I have my personal story builder, I have my idea of what I'm most proud of, my strengths and weaknesses. I'm building that out.
In a spreadsheet?
Of course, yeah, of course. It's all very organized. But I think at first it takes understanding who you are and what you want in life, building that out, what's your 10-year vision, and bringing that back down to a 2-year kind of chapter.
Right.
And then when you're looking at a school, it's how does that school kind of align with you? And so I think fit is something we always toss around, but it can be very kind of an ambiguous idea. To me, fit is that kind of that gut instinct. It's that thinking fast and slow from Kahneman. It's that system one fast thinking. It's that gut reaction. And for me, it was when I came to Cell Weekend. I came to 2 schools, and I kind of saw really the dynamics of the individuals, the culture, the aspect. When I came to Michigan, there was a certain level of energy that I really gravitated towards that I didn't get at different schools. And there really was that gut feeling. So all my spreadsheets, all my System 2 rigor went out the door. Right. And it really is that kind of that aha moment that you're like, this is what I want to be a part of.
Nate, how about you?
No, I think I agree with a lot of what you said. I actually feel a little bit happy I did not make any spreadsheets, but I think when I started speaking, so when I started going through the process, I started speaking with students, both some of the students I knew at different schools, as well as reaching out blindly to people that were on the websites, and I started figuring out who I was clicking with, what drove and what motivated the people at some of the different schools, what they were speaking about, how they spoke about their programs. And then once I went on campus, honestly, there was a very clear moment that Yale just clicked with me. And I walked away from the interview actually excited. And I don't think I've ever really walked away from an interview other than nervous, but I was super excited and I could see myself there. And I think there's something just very intangible that you feel at the right program. Something that speaks to you that it's impossible to put into a spreadsheet. So I'd encourage everyone to do your research, kind of winnow down based on high-level criteria, like you want a school that excels in whatever aspects you're looking for or is located in whatever cities you're looking for. But then you just need to kind of throw your hands up and immerse yourself in the student body there and see what they talk about, what the community feels, how the community clicks with you, and there will definitely be a school that just resonates more with you than others, because every school kind of has its own culture, its own norms, its own guiding principles that will speak to you, I think.
And what comes through in both your stories is the importance of actually going to a campus, and really meeting the students, meeting the faculty, and getting a real true feel for what that school could be like for you.
Or if you're an international student, getting in touch with some of the alumni or current students if you're not able to go visit campus.
Good point.
How many times if I've gotten an email, either on LinkedIn or a random email saying, let's connect, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Ariana, did you use certain tools to decide if the school was right for you?
Yeah. So I was told to use certain tools. So I did use certain tools.
Told? What do
Yeah.
you mean told?
Just folks that had gone through the process, they were like, you have to make the spreadsheet, figure out your story, your journey. That actually didn't work for me as well. I think I'm a little offbeat perhaps for the MBA program, but I'm more of a see where things go kind of
Right.
person, not a 10-year plan.
Uh-huh.
That stresses me out. So I just go
So you're
day by
spontaneous.
day.
You go with the
I am
flow.
very spontaneous,
Okay.
go with the flow. So I had my spreadsheets and I felt ready to go. And then based on the spreadsheet, it had a very different order, perhaps, of like schools I was looking at. But when I arrived in Michigan, for me, it was like very similar to what Nate and Ramu were saying. I actually interacted with one student who was my host. She had hosted me in her home. And I remember I came back from the day, I started making up the sofa, and she came in and she stared at me, and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not doing it right. Like, maybe I should be out. Should
You're
I be
making
doing
up
something
her
else?"
sofa.
I'm making up her sofa so I can go to bed, and she's like, "You're sleeping in my bed. Like, I'm sleeping on the sofa. You need your rest. Like, this is a big weekend for you."
Wow.
And I was shocked and blown away. My own brothers like won't give me their bed. They'll like make me sleep on the sofa if we have to share. So that was a moment for me. I think that's when
Wow.
the gut starts to speak, because I realized like this is someone that barely knows me and has already given me so much.
How did you get matched up with her?
Through the admissions office.
How about that?
Yeah, and she is also at Microsoft where I'll be going after school. So she's gonna be a mentor for life.
Oh, that's terrific.
But that was a really key moment for me, because I've not experienced that ever in my life. So to have someone offer their own bed to me when I was visiting and I had just met this person, I think that was a really key differentiator, because it made me realize like this is someone that I want to model myself after. And I gave my bed to a friend who's now at Ross the year after, and I imagine that she
Pay
will
it
do
forward.
the same. Exactly. Now it's a tradition.
Wow. So Tam, how important was culture in determining the right fit for you?
Probably the number one piece that I was looking at when it came to making the right decision. I think that, similar to Ariana, there were tools that I wish I had known about, particularly things like Management Leaders for Tomorrow, opportunities that I could have used to help me better hone some of these pieces that I didn't quite understand. So it really did come down to me a lot for things like fit. And culture. And so I did a lot of looking. I think that it's hard sometimes on a website to feel like, is this authentically what this school does? Or are these really nice thoughts you put on a piece of paper, or you had a marketing officer put on a piece of paper, who are incredibly intelligent and thoughtful people, but sometimes there still can be that disconnect. And so for me, it was connecting with people. The culture for me of Haas, we have 4 defining principles that I read them, and even in essays that I wrote for the school, I said, like, these are my values. It isn't that I'm looking at something and saying, oh, I'd love to aspire to these. And I think particularly for Haas, one thing I think is important is that when they cultivated their defining principles, the dean right now will openly talk about the process he went through. And it was about surveying our current population, our faculty, our staff, and our students, and saying, how would you describe what we have here? And then created the principles based off of that. Whereas all too often, companies, organizations, schools say, here are our values and we're working towards them one day. We aspire to do these things, we aspire to live these things and be these things, versus a place that said, we are just describing what already exists, and you could feel it as soon as you got there. You feel it in the students. I have a very similar story as Ariana of getting there on student weekend, but it was different. It was actually, I was paired with 2 other incoming students who were all, we were all Consortium for Graduate Management and Study, and I think that we got there, we were all scared, and she was looking through her luggage. She had been traveling for the last couple of months, and she couldn't find shoes. She's like, I don't know where my shoes are. These are a very critical thing to go and show up someplace and have your shoes. And it was a very duh moment for me in a similar way, where I was just like, oh, well, I've got a pair, like take the pair. And there was kind of automatically this feeling of, I've got your back, you've got mine, we're here to do this together. And that culture then just permeated out throughout the weekend, that for me, even with other schools I visited to learn or anything, I just didn't feel it in the same way that it meant something personal to what I work towards and what I care about.
And one thing I like about the backgrounds of all the four of you is that I think you very much represent what people want out of an MBA. Many people go into a program hoping to use the degree to transition out of a career. Some people make the so-called triple jump where they transition out of a company, an industry, and a geography. And then some people want to accelerate their careers. And you know, Nate and Ramu, I think you two fall in that category since you're going to stay in the consulting industry. But tell me how you thought that the degree itself and the one at Ross would help propel you out of the nonprofit world. I imagine that that's what you wanted to do to get you this job at Microsoft.
Yeah, so a few things that I was looking at was, I actually love the nonprofit sector. I hope to transition back in the future or get involved in some sort of way. But I saw the work that we were doing had limited impact, just for the nature that you're kind of an outsider trying to affect the corporate world. And again, I wanted to be in the corporate world, to be an advocate and champion there for diversity, equity, inclusion, and among other things. So when I was looking at programs, I wanted a program that had a really strong human capital focus, a program that was dedicated to diversity, equity, inclusion, and that actually had some really tangible centers or resources. So a few things that stood out to me at Michigan. Number one is that you're able to take classes at other schools. That was very important to me. I wanted to take an interdisciplinary focus with my MBA, and I've been able to take classes in education, at the law school, like you name it. That was number one. Number two, we have the amazing Center for Positive Organizations here, which I got involved in as a fellow. And so their whole purpose is around, you know, how can you bring out the best in your employees so that they could bring out the best in the company. And sometimes in the nonprofit sector, I think we struggle with that because you're really dedicated to a mission and you sort of forget about your own needs. And I definitely used to ascribe by that, and then I started to get burnt out. So moving into the future, I'm very much about, let me make sure I'm good so that I can help others before I do that. And so the Center for Positive Organizations I thought was really great because they have a lot of amazing like theory and research, and they bring in practitioners all the time, and we have positive link talks. And so when I came, learning about that center was really amazing. And then the last thing was that human capital and HR, that was the space I wanted to go into because that's where I saw D&I sort of playing a role. And not all the schools have that as like a large focus, so I really wanted to zero in on schools that had that. We had a human capital club. We have fact groups here at Ross, which I think they have equivalents at other schools, where there are second years through our career services office that prepares you for certain industries. And there were 2 human capital fact groups. So, and then Diane Economy, who's a rock star on admissions team, she was our human capital champion. So I just saw all of these cues.
So you may not have done a spreadsheet, but you did one in your head.
I guess I had one in my head.
And looking at the Ross program and what you really wanted out of an MBA.
Yeah, and I don't know if I even knew, but once I started showing up at schools, I was like, oh, Center for Positive Organization, what's that? That's what I'm interested
Right.
in. Cool. Diana Connor, she's awesome. I want to know what she's done. So I think it all started to come together when I started visiting the schools and learning a little bit more about their offerings. And I did see myself going into the HR space, and that is what I'm doing immediately after. So being able to just kind of do a little survey of the landscape at the school and figure out, do they have the resources here
Right.
that I want and need to succeed?
And Nate, you actually left a boutique consulting firm. You're going to Boston Consulting Group.
Yes.
As soon as you graduate in 3 weeks. Did you know you wanted to continue with consulting when you went to the MBA program?
Yeah, so I wasn't 100% dead set on going into consulting. I was open to exploring some other things, and I think that's one of the important things when you go into school is even if you have a strong intuition of what you want to do, being open throughout the process, and not just about careers, right? Just being open to all types of experiences, because it's a really special 2 years that you'll never get to repeat, and there's so many opportunities to kind of test your boundaries and discover new things and learn new things and approach the world in different ways. And I think it's important to always keep your mind open to that. And so I was open to other careers, but I think I strongly wanted to go into consulting. And as I started going through the recruiting process and speaking with people and going through the networking process, I very quickly reminded myself of like why I was in consulting, why I really wanted to go back into consulting, and like looking forward 5 years or so where I see myself, I hope to be going into public policy or something like in economic policy in Washington, D.C. And I feel like consulting is definitely a very good like base to help get you there. So yeah, consulting is kind of where I saw myself going.
And Ramu, you were at Deloitte.
Yeah.
You're going back to Deloitte.
Yes.
I need to tell people who may not know this that if you go back to Deloitte after coming from Deloitte, you are basically reimbursed for your entire tuition.
Sponsorship,
plus interest, no less.
Yeah.
So that's a really great deal.
It is a good deal. The way that we look at Deloitte in terms of our model from consultant to senior consultant, we typically had an up and out model. We moved away from that, so you have an option to stay with the firm. So if you are going to leave the firm, you need to think really critically about what it is about yourself you need to have in terms of business school to fill those gaps. So that's what I talk about. There's your strengths and your weaknesses. What are the areas of competencies you want to fill in with business schools? So Nate, you talked a little bit about what you wanted out of business school, right? The idea of being able to do different things. I think the other component of that is what do you need to get out of business school? And for me, it was kind of the business fundamentals, the rigor of core accounting, finance that I didn't have in engineering. I knew the future of what I was going into in consulting was financial services firms are always talking about how they're technology companies. So I wanted more experience in technology strategy, business model innovation, new age of innovation. Those are courses that really resonated with me. So I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to get out of business school and fill those gaps in.
And in your spreadsheet, let's go back to that. Did you weigh factors like the academics, the co-curriculars, the career outcomes of different schools?
Oh yeah, they had a very rigorous matrix system where I had schools and I had those dimensions and I had weightings for each of those and I had a spreadsheet that gave me a ranking.
How'd you come up with weightings though?
Same thing that probably a lot of branding and companies are doing for schools. You're taking a very abstract idea of a school and you're picking competencies of, okay, incoming GMAT, outgoing this, and boiling it down to a number. I'm trying to do the same thing, but on a personal level. So what matters more to me? Is it location, or is it culture, or is it the curriculum, or is it the ranking itself? Those all have individual weightings, and then I boil that down, but like I said, that went out the door.
Right, because it's less about the result, more about the process.
Yeah.
And how that leads you to think about the different programs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Tim, there are a number of different types of experiences in an MBA program. Experiential learning is a very big and important part of it. Case studies, lectures, immersion trips. What resonated with you in your first year?
So I'm coming from also having at least gone to school to aspire to become a teacher. So the idea of experiential learning for me was very important in getting that hands-on nature of what I was going to do. I really believe that simply reading hundreds of pages of paper and going into a classroom and having people talk at you is not an ideal way to learn. It's not an ideal way to actually then practice it later on as you want to go out into the field. So for me at Haas, one of the things that stood out was our International Business Development course, which a good chunk of our students do, and I am lucky to have bid into it with the right number of points. It's a very competitive system to try to get into.
Plus you're going to Uganda soon.
Yes, so I leave in, it's 10 days now. I leave in 10 days for Uganda, where I'll be there for 3 weeks, kind of being a semi-consultant with a team of 4 or 5 other of my classmates, where we'll look at their current tourism and create a business strategy that focuses on marketing, the talent pipeline, and their infrastructure, to think a little bit more about what they could be doing based on other countries, their neighbors, what's working and what's not. And the best part of that, to your point of experiential, is we'll be there. We've done a lot of rigorous research prior, and it's been really interesting. I think my classmates are literally top-notch when they've been putting their diligent effort in. And then we'll get there and just be there. We're going to be in the communities, talking to everybody that we can, doing interviews every day. And I think that opportunity to then put all that together and come back and have presented them a plan, for me, is the best way to have put all of these core classes into action and seen if, does it actually resonate with someone? Does it resonate with someone that's not US-centric? What does that look like if we're really trying to understand our impact, which is more global as we get more connected as a society?
I should ask you, Ariana, because at Michigan Ross, one of the quintessential elements of the MBA experience is in fact experiential. It's the so-called MAP program.
Yes.
What did you do in MAP, and talk about it?
Sure. So for my MAP, I worked with an education-focused NGO in Cambodia. They were founded by a young woman who had survived the genocide in Cambodia, and she went on to be very successful and had a moment in her life where she noticed some children that were on a dump site, and they were collecting garbage to try to find some food and eat. And so she created this nonprofit to provide holistic services to lift children out of poverty. So for me, that was towards the last quarter of our first year. I had gone through the core, I had gotten my internship. I was like, I kind of want to go back to my social impact roots, but I want to challenge myself a little bit outside my comfort zone. I had never done international work. I've not done a lot of traveling, period. So I was a little nervous to think about how to apply some of these concepts in the nonprofit work I've done domestically abroad and see what could be applied, what couldn't. So I spent about a week there, and we got to visit all of the different sites that the nonprofit was supporting, and we worked on a fundraising plan for them. So it's interesting because in nonprofit you do fundraising, and obviously in for-profit you're revenue generating. But there was a lot of concepts that we were able to translate over, and then it was nice because I became like the go-to person on the team because I had the nonprofit experience and I worked in corporate engagement. So I was able to bring a lot of my background into the work. But I also want to speak just briefly about another program I did immediately after my first year. It's called Ross Open Road. It used to be called MBAs Across America.
Know it well.
You know it well. So it was founded by a couple of Harvard folks, I think, and it used to bring together students from different MBAs, and then they would hit the road in the US and support small businesses and entrepreneurs here. So again, I'm much more focused on just domestic work. I've not had a lot of international experience, and I think there's a lot of challenges in our own country, in our own society, so I really wanted to dive deep into that. And so immediately after MAP, I hit the road with 3 of my classmates, and we worked first in Detroit. All of the groups start in Detroit, so we have our new class this year. They had just started this week. We focused on supporting a Black-owned business in Chicago. Went to a buffalo meat manufacturer in South Dakota. So that was a really interesting experience for me as well, because it did force me to apply everything that I learned in a week for a small business. And for small businesses, that's not something you talk about a lot in MBA programs. We're focused more on larger organizations and corporations, but small businesses, you need to create something that's tangible and that's going to move the needle for them. So it was an amazing experience to apply what we learned, make it super tangible and applicable to a business that was really going to make a difference for.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Ramu, how about you?
There is multiple components. I think business schools in general are thinking about how can they integrate new components into their curriculum outside of just pure finance, pure accounting. You can get that online. You can get at Udemy, Coursera. So how do you actually integrate that into the classroom experience? And so at Ross, what we look at is every class has some type of action-based learning component that I think is really important. Part of that is knowing myself. I learn best by doing, and I think a lot of us do. I think case method has its practicality in a classroom setting, but our classes have a simulation component. One of the classes I took, data insights and analytics, was very focused on taking. Our professor has his own consulting company outside of this. He brings in outside casework that he's actually done, formats it into a classroom setting, gives us actual data that he's used, very hairy data sets, and he wants us to present a recommendation with insights every week. So we're presenting a deck to the classroom on what we've done. These are actual cases that he's looked at, and so he has real recommendations. And what I liked, Professor Ahn would push us not just to provide accurate insights, but also be selling that next project. Think about what are you gonna deliver to them to get that next project out to them. Action-based learning is a critical component, and I think every school is looking at how can they integrate that into their curriculum.
It's often said that the MBA experience is transformative, that it truly changes not only your outlook on business, but even who you are and who you want to become. Nate, how's the MBA changed you?
Yeah, so I think the way that I have most changed and I think I was surprised about it, is just in a lot of very soft skill types of ways. The way that I lead and the way that I interact with people, the confidence I got. And I think one of the things I really appreciated about SOM, or a few of the things that I've appreciated. One is the core lasts a year, and you're with the same people, the same cohort, the same small learning team for an entire year, and you kick off that year in a small week-long course called Managing Groups and Teams, where it's kind of like a simulation course where you go through a lot of trials with this group of 8 people that you work with throughout the entire year. And I think that spending an entire year with a group of 8 people really teaches you a lot about yourself, how to lead, when you should lead, when you should step back, how you can learn from people, different ways that people effectively communicate with teams. And it also being within one cohort really makes it a safe space to ask questions, to understand how different people approach problems, to really get deep relationships and understand how knowing people and knowing their background and communicating with people and not making every single project just a transaction, but trying to really get to know them and network with them helps you understand their motivations and how they think and how they approach problems, which not only makes you a better teammate with them, not only makes your connections with them better, but also can kind of push you and inspire you to lead in different ways. And so I'd say another thing that is really nice about SOMs and the way their curriculum is set up is that because it's so integrated with the home university, with Yale broadly, there are a lot of not only joint degrees, but a lot of people who aren't even in the business school in all of your classes. So I think being around people who aren't always just business school students that don't have the same exact outlook on life or the same exact thought process, again, forces you to not only better explain yourself, but being open to different ways of approaching a problem. So I think a lot of the ways that I've changed and that I've transformed isn't necessarily that I know corporate finance better now, or that I hopefully, or that I know accounting better now, or marketing better, but I can think about problems more holistically, and I can work with people across a spectrum, across a range. And I've pushed myself to communicate with people in ways that I wouldn't have communicated before. I've taken on problems and I've taken classes that I never would have taken before, but I've been encouraged by people. So I think I've just very much broadened my horizons and fundamentally become more introspective and really redefined what leadership looks like, the role of business and the role of business as an actor in society. And I think all those like non-quantifiable, hard skills are really what I've taken out of the MBA program, and I think it's nice because again, you can go online and take a Coursera course on accounting, I suppose, but getting those those soft skills are really important, especially as you continue to progress in your career. I noticed the bifurcation of people when I was at my firm before school, people who had MBAs or people who had those soft skills and people who didn't. Some of them were very effective leaders and very good at motivating and very good at helping you progress and develop, and the others weren't. And so.
Okay, so Tam, you're midway through your transformative experience. Do you feel changed in any way?
I definitely feel changed. I think that one thing that's also important to convey, because this is supposed to be the real talk behind it, is no one discusses how hard it's going to be. No one talks about how emotionally, physically, mentally difficult the experience will be. I think everybody wants to put a really nice ribbon on an MBA and say it was the best 2 years of my life. I can't believe I got that. And I think I will walk out having said that undoubtedly, but I don't think anyone changes without growing. It's called growing pains for a reason. If growing was easy, if there was no tribulation in it, then no one really would have learned much of anything anyway. So I think going through the first year, one of the kind of highlights for me has been that I had my group back home. I had my people, I had my spaces, my nonprofit, all the things I did. And coming to business school really pushed me out of them. I mean, making the decision undoubtedly as an East Coaster almost my entire life to go to the West Coast was terrifying. And I think saying that I'm gonna get goodbye to all my connections and all the people that kind of give me that sense was something that pushed me quite drastically. But it's been my classmates, most honestly, and also the classmates that I didn't know I was going to become closest friends with. The people that push my perspective, the people that ask me questions that at times, I can't understand how we're not speaking the same language, and yet we are, but have asked me in depth, what does that mean? what does that mean to me? I am also a massive champion of diversity, equity, inclusion, working for underrepresented minorities, understanding what it will look like for me now as a Latina coming out with an MBA, having that after my name. But what I didn't think about going in is how I was going to have to navigate that space amongst classmates, and then have to think about how did I need support from them in a way maybe I didn't even know I was going to need support. I came from a liberal arts background. I did not come from business beforehand. So getting integrated into the academics even has been difficult. And it's been study teams like that. I have a classmate of mine who I finished a midterm and did not feel great about it. And I went to my study team and said, it went okay. And we were in the middle of our feedback, similar, like kind of this idea of teams and getting better at it. And he looked at me and he said, Tam, and he's Peruvian, so he has this like lovely way of like smiling as he says everything he says, but he went, Tam, how dare you come out of the weekend and not feel good on this exam and you didn't call me? I was sitting at home all day on Saturday. I would have come over and sat with you for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours until you understood that material. I'm here for you. Would you let me be here for you? And I think that those glances have pushed me to remember kind of even just the good in another human, a good in a person you may not know. And we love this idea of a single story. So you look at a classmate or you look at a person and you've decided you know them, but you actually don't know much about them internally. And I think giving an opportunity for me to give that to people and then get it in return has been invaluable, even if challenging at times. And just makes my next year, it's something I feel a little bad for you all because you're like, oh, I'm done, I'm leaving. And I'm like, yes, I have a whole other year to do.
Don't feel bad, we're ready to get out.
Was that an accounting class?
That was, I think it was, actually it was accounting. That's scary. How did
There you go.
I was like, wait, which one of that was? It was accounting.
Ramu, what advice would you give a prospective student in terms of entering that research comparison phase? Would you recommend that spreadsheet?
I would say, I mean, this is going to sound, like duh, but I think start early. For me, this process takes a lot of soul searching. It's a grueling process, and you need to be prepared for those essays, for those recommendation letters. You need to be able to prepare your recommenders for, the essays they need to write themselves. That all takes time. And even before this, there's a lot of introspection into understanding yourself and what do you want. So start early. Get the GMAT out of the way if you can. Knock it out. knock the GMAT out. Start early. Talk to people. If you can visit campus. Start those conversations. Build a tracker of who you're talking to and keep notes of what they're saying and kind of what your takeaways were initially from that conversation. Build that profile of what the school is to you. It's not what someone else tells you what it is, but you have to write your own persona for the school and how you think that fits. Fit is a two-way street. It's not only how you think your values align with the school, but how do the school's values align with you? And you start to build that idea out. And once you actually get to that stage, hopefully in early, whatever it's August or so, you feel really ready for your round 1 applications to really knock them out. Because you've done a lot of introspection, a lot of legwork up in front of that. You understand what your strengths are, what do you want to get out of your certain essays, your recommender essays, your resume, and what you want to kind of highlight. So starting early is the best advice. That's always good advice.
Ariana, do you have any advice?
I think, let's see, something that I don't think is said enough is to, if you're able to go visit the schools, go during a non-admissions setup weekend, because I love our admissions teams all across all the schools, but they're putting on the best outfit, they're putting on the best show, and if you really want to get a sense of a place, go when the best outfits aren't on. And then that's when you can really start to observe people in their natural habitats in school, and you get to see and see those little things that really contribute to what the culture is. So I think go during the non-big weekends and start to take in some of that experience.
Gee, you don't have anthropology in your background, do you?
I know, right? Sociology, psychology, all of that.
Well, John, if I could just add to that, I think that one thing there is I love that advice, and what I might suggest is if you can, go a few days before the admitted students weekend so you get that, because at least on my end too, by talking to current students or talking to somebody, you're not really ever talking to someone that's going to be your classmate. So by going during an admitted students weekend, I think one of the things that I was most eager to see is who was I going to sit next to? Who were were going to become my friends, who were going to be the people that kind of led me, because of course our second years would, but then they would graduate. And so I think that at least going to the admitted students kind of setup gave me a more realistic view of who they'd be. And then the only thing I'd add to Ramu's piece as well is that I looked for schools that I could be a trailblazer at. I was clear that a lot of the directions I was coming from and going towards were not going to be your like strict business, and I think that that's why like where business is going today is it is becoming more interdisciplinary, it is becoming more nuanced. You don't have to have this like same corporate culture everywhere, and that's changing. And so looking for a school where like, and I felt it at Haas, where I could go and be a trailblazer and set up a new path and not feel like I was the anomaly or not feel like I was doing it poorly, but actually celebrated and respected and supported in that was very important. And I don't think all schools are set up with a mechanism quite yet to move you there.
Now, Tam, you're going to Uganda. Ariana, you went to Cambodia. Nate and Ramu, were global opportunities important to you in selecting an MBA program? And if so, did you participate in any?
Yeah, so I'll go first, and then you can add on. But so I think global opportunities were certainly important. I won't like repeat that. The world is becoming increasingly global, and learning how to interact with people and with multinationals is obviously important. So I think there are a few different opportunities that I took advantage of at SOM. I think like most obviously I did an international experience trip. At Yale, you're required to do some type of global studies requirement. So I took a class and then went to Israel. And so the class was a quarter long, and it was focused on the history and culture of the Middle East broadly, and then in Israel specifically, Israel has a lot of startups and is very innovative.
Startup nation.
Right, yes, we read the book. And so when we went, we learned a lot about like their startup culture there, and then when we went, we met with a lot of founders and a lot of different startups, as well as different governmental organizations over there and some diplomats, to get a broader understanding of the area. But what I really took out of that class is, well, I guess like two things. The class was composed of like 30 or so students. It was the first time that we really started mixing in class outside of our cohort. And so it was a great opportunity to go to like a foreign place. So we went to Jordan beforehand, just a group of 14 of us, and we were in the desert for like 2 days. Without like cell phones, and it was the first time where I think for over a half a year that I just like stopped and I put my phone away because we couldn't use it, and we sat around like a campfire and just talked about like why we were in school and what motivated us and like where we came from and like the way that we saw the world, and getting those like deep conversations, I think, is when it initially clicked in me that even people who are around you all the time and have shared experiences have very different perspectives and have very different motivations. And it's a disservice to kind of be next to somebody for 6 months and not really get to know them on a deeper level. And I think that's when I started realizing the importance of getting to know your classmates and getting to know the people that you work with. So I think in that sense it was very transformative. Another way that I really think that I've learned to operate more globally is just the sheer number of people who go to school with me who have who are not from the United States or have a foreign passport. I think at Yale it's something like 50%, and so you're forced to interact and learn from and learn how different people approach different problems. And so there's obviously within the curriculum a lot of global cases, and you'll talk about multinationals, and you'll take classes on being a global team and like how different teams can overcome cross-cultural barriers. But when you're a small learning team of 4 people, like half of them are not from the United States, like that right there is an opportunity that you have to learn how to work in a global team.
Indeed.
And so I think that just pushes you from day one to, you can't like shield yourself from it because it's all international all around you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Working with international students definitely gives you a new dynamic in your group settings. John, when I go abroad, I want to have fun. So all my trips that I've done in business school, so went to Peru and went to Norway, have been more fun treks. So we do a M-Trek before school starts. So Peru is the one I went on, and then I led one to Norway. But that being said, I did do some work at Deloitte internationally. I worked in London for a little bit, and then my internship was at Project Finance, an international student lending company. And so in that capacity, I was able to really interface with people from London, from the South Africa office, And our chief business development officer was really focused on developing that idea of how do we work across borders. So he recommends a book called The Culture Map, which I think is a really fantastic read. It talks about the differences in culture, how communication styles are very different from implicit and explicit communication styles, and how do you kind of navigate that pathway. It's really important to understand that as this world becomes more globalized. But when I go abroad, it's for mostly recreational.
All right, we're running out of time, but we have a couple of questions from our audience. We have someone who works at Twitter who asks, given what you know now, what, if anything, would you do differently in your MBA journey? Ariana, you want to tackle that?
Sure. Speaking to, I think something that Tam mentioned earlier is that it can be a very grueling process, and I think oftentimes you don't know that until you actually get here.
Yeah, but you're a poet. You're not
poet.
a quant.
That's true. I could be a quant. No, I'm not a quant. But I would say one of the things I do regret and I wish I had done more of was just really prioritizing my mental and physical and emotional health while I was here. I think it's something that we don't talk about a lot in different business programs and even in business in general. I think the corporate space, I'm always looking to see like what are some of the trends that are happening in that space, and I think it'll start to back up into the MBA programs. But I remember at Microsoft where I was at the summer, wellness was very, very important, talking about mental health. And so I didn't realize it until like a month ago, but our counseling and psychological services right across my dorm, right across the street from my dorm. And if I had known that, I would have done, I'd like to think I would have gone more often. I'll be around a little bit this summer. I'm trying to take advantage of it before I leave and build some really good habits. But I think that's something that is really important. It is a transformative experience, but it's also grueling, and there are hard times, and you're not surrounded by your comfort zone and the folks that have helped you get here. So I think taking advantage of that and just making sure that you're prioritizing the things that are important to you, whether it be your mental and physical health or what have you, is really important.
Tam, you have advice?
What would I have changed so far? I think I probably would have changed. It's more of like what I would have done to prepare to come in. I didn't even recognize that there was going to be I call it business is a different language to me. So I didn't know when I was going to come in that I was going to have to like kind of be in these classes and already know a language that I wasn't using every day. I really wish I had done something as simple as kind of picked up books beforehand that were business focused. That I could have done over time, even in my application phase, so that when I got here, it didn't feel so much like I was a fish out of water trying to both learn a new language and all these people and figure out which co-curricular and all the things that kind of keep going on the ands. And it would have been pretty simple to have done.
Ramu, here's a question from someone at Facebook. What surprised you most about the MBA experience?
Oh, wow. You alluded this earlier, but it is rigorous. I think there is a concept at business school, at least, so my brother is a PhD, and he saw his friends at Wharton having a really fun time, and he said, oh, those business school kids, all they do is just party. There is a true aspect that our classes are tough. They are academically rigorous. And so I think that's a stereotype that we get wrong sometimes at business school. We are learning true concepts. They're tough, a lot of casework, a lot of homework. We're not, it can be grueling. And so that on top of the recruiting aspect, on top of the networking aspects, on top of the stresses of actually just living, not from your hometown, can all kind of compile on you. So you need to have your own space, your own time. Set in some time on your own calendar to have some personal space and time. Maybe it's a gym time or it's a phone call with your wife or girlfriend. But you need that time as well because this is a mentally and physically grueling.
Nate, biggest surprise for you?
I think what surprised me is how, you come in and you have all these expectations like that everything is going to be different and then you have all these opportunities. I think it's very easy to kind of fall into like whatever your niche is and kind of stay in your little silo or in your track, even though there's like 300 really interesting people around you. And if you're not very conscious about it, I think it's very easy to go through the motions every single day and go to class and do your homework and like hang out with your group of friends that you've met at the very beginning of the year and never really expand your horizons, which I think is a real shame if you go ahead and do that. And I don't know how to, I don't know if that MBA program can really fix it for you, but I came in and thought that just every single day it was going to be very easy and you were going to be forced to do all the a million different things. And I think if you aren't conscious about how you're spending your time, and you're not, and you don't prioritize your time correctly, it's very easy to kind of just go through the motions and just check a lot of boxes without really pushing yourself and consciously trying to make sure that you're going down the path that you set out to do. So I think the biggest surprise is how important it is to really know yourself at all times and know what you're trying to get out of the day, out of the week, and out of the month, and then making sure that you're prioritizing your actions every single day so you're going down the right path and doing the right things.
That's great advice. So, believe it or not, our time has run out. But I think you've provided a lot of valuable insight and perspective to people out there who might be considering this degree. I do think it is a transformative experience, and I can judge by your comments that none of you have any remorse about this whatsoever. So, Ariana, thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck at Microsoft. Nate, good luck at BCG.
Thank you.
Tim, we don't know where you're going to go, but you're going to have a lot of fun in Uganda soon.
Yes, I'll be at Danaher this summer, so
There you go.
at least a first step.
And Ramu, good luck to you at Deloitte.